North are about to make huge defensive changes. Will it work? Let's talk about it.
And Stevens lining him up too. Let there be no mistake about that. Stevens went at him at 100 miles an hour. He get another go. He grabs him. He's grabbed play on behind the man.
Welcome back, everybody. Further north, pre-season. There's so much stuff going on. But to be fair, I'm trying to find an interesting episode for you guys, and that's why we've had to wheel out the big dog. It's Chief. He's here. He's always got hot takes, and that's what's going to make this an interesting episode. Chief, welcome back on the pod. First time for the year. How's life, mate?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Josh, and Happy New Year to all the Further North fans out there. It's been a hectic back end of last year, start of this year, but very keen to get into some North chat.
I mean, look, even though we're at the start of pre-season, there isn't crazy talking points going on team-wise, I guess, even though we've got some here. But there's a lot of stuff going on off the field for North Melbourne that we're going to debate in this podcast too. Just a little run sheet for you guys to know what you got in store today with us. We're going to go through a few of the rumours defensively about what we're going to be changing. There's some big changes coming in defence. Goodbye to the zone. So we're going to dive into that to see if that can actually improve our defence this year. Positional changes. Is there going to be any other rogue positional changes we can think of? And of course, the massive breaking news. Last week, everything happens the day after I record. Paul Curtis had some off-field issues in December, which is just insane. You know, out of nowhere sort of stuff. And my first reaction to that was, how did I not know this? And then I realized I'm not his best mate. So, of course, I didn't know. But we will get into that and a little bit more as we go. Let's kick this off really quickly. Going to mention live show, even though, yes, it is sold out. I just want to say thank you to everybody again for buying the tickets and coming along and supporting the show. Going to be so much fun. Bonehead Brewing, doors at 1 p.m. on the 8th of Feb. So I'm super excited to see you guys down there. We've got heaps of prizes, giveaways. We've got trivia. So all you North Nuffies out there, get learning because we're going to dive down to the archives there. Player guessing game is back. It's all happening. So I'm very, very excited. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all there. There'll be more information coming out about little things to do with the day, but you will hear that when you need to know. All right. Subscribe too, please. I always forget to say that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel because it helps me a lot. Like the video. And please put your comments down below on all this sort of stuff because I want to know what you guys think about the defensive things we're about to get into because it is incredibly interesting. So, Chief, the biggest shift that we're hearing tactically for North Melbourne this offseason is no more zone in the back line, and we're going to go to more back shoulder defending, slightly more one-on-one style stuff. Now, we know our defense statistically is not very good, even though we had this weird patch in the middle of the year last year where we were very good for about 6 weeks. We're not great defensively. When you heard about this, what was your first reaction to hearing that we're going to go away from the zone and more to back shoulder defending? Does this give you confidence that we're doing something positive for this group, or are you still skeptical?
I'm a little bit skeptical. I naturally am when, we're 3 years into the Clarko era and we're making quite big tactical shifts in the way that we go about our play. I guess there's two ways you can look at it. One is that we abandoned it because it was the wrong approach, or we abandoned it because we didn't have the players to play it. I guess it's very difficult to know which one. I also think that one reason why the zone defense is naturally can be more effective for our sort of defenses is because it relies less on one-on-one skill and one-on-one wins and is more about a collective. And if you've got players that potentially aren't as highly rated or as skilled, then it can, as long as they work well in that team, it can actually hide them a little bit. But clearly over the last 3 years, it hasn't worked because we've not improved our defense significantly. And we have a little bit year on year, maybe like last year on year, it was like maybe a goal and a game better, but it's still bottom 3 in the competition, which is still very, very poor. And that's going to really cost us and keep us from going from where we are at the moment to like top 10, which is kind of where we want to be in the next 2 years. So I actually, in a lot of ways, like this shift. I think it simplifies things a little bit, potentially. I think that there are other teams out there that do play that style of defense that means that they're a little bit more accountable. And I think for us, when we're playing really, really badly, it means that the opposition is less likely to get those really easy goals out the back, which makes us look absolutely terrible. And I remember that Geelong game last year where Jeremy Cameron literally just stood there like 30 metres out from goal and just waited for the ball to come to him and ended up
I always
kicking
think of the
11.
Joe Danaher one in Gather Round a few years ago as well, where he was just sitting at the back 30 metres off Mackay.
How it happens, you never know. But hopefully those goals sort of are lessened. But I guess the broader question in our context is this kind of the end of Clarko's cluster as a concept? Because if we go back to particularly 2008 when Clarko started playing that zonal type of defence, it was quite revolutionary at that point, and teams really struggled to learn how to deal with it. And essentially they became a dynasty team over the course of like 7 or 8 years. So it probably signals, if that is the way that we're going, it probably signals the end of Clarko's cluster. And I mean, Clarko's back shoulder defence doesn't have quite the same ring to it, does it?
That is right. I mean, it's all about the catchy name. That's what's going to give the fans the confidence moving forward. I guess off the bat for me, when I heard about this, I think the general punter, which is what we are, Chief, I think off the bat, that makes us feel more confident because it feels like we're going more defensive instead of trying to attack off defense straight away. I don't know if we've got the players with a good combination of offense and defense to attack. So I feel like when I'm looking at individuals in our backline, I think it would suit us a little bit more, and I think it'll help us learn how to defend before trying to attack off the defense. And I feel like we're trying to learn how to attack off defense before we actually know how to stop the ball from going through the goals sometimes, you know? And I'm looking at the team, right? We have young guys like Dawson last year didn't necessarily break into the team, but I think he showed us last year that the plan is for him to be that key defender eventually. Drafting a Thread Gold, Griffin Logue coming back. These are guys that I look at and go, they're probably better one-on-one defenders than in a zone. Griffin Logue can be a little bit of a hybrid, but when I look at Griffin Logue's weaknesses, I think back to that Geelong game, or I think about some of the other times I've gone, what is he doing? And it is when we're trying to play this zone and he's just caught in no man's land. But I feel like Griffin Logue physically, 1v1 can be a pretty solid defender and at least bring that ball to ground. I look at Pink and his one-on-one defending, which improved massively last year, and Dawson. And those three guys over the last 12 months, I think we've all learnt they're probably better one-on-one defenders than zonal defenders. Thread Gold seems to be a hybrid, never played an AFL game. I don't expect him to impact that defense this year. Charlie Comben, fantastic interceptor, maybe not the best one-on-one. But if we've got Logue, Pink, or Dawson down there, who I would say their strength defensively probably is more one-on-one back shoulder style defending, where you let Chom intercept and maybe we can get it off to Caleb Daniel, Colin McKercher, and O'Sullivan, a Hardiman who's playing around that area. Maybe that's going to be able to push us forward a little bit more. How do you feel about that? Because I feel like he's tailoring the defense to the players that we've got a little bit more than trying to make them play a style that isn't necessarily in their wheelhouse.
Yeah, that's the crux of the whole thing, I guess, is do you play a style, this goes for the game plan generally, do you play a style of game that suits the team that you've got, or do you recruit for a style of game? And it's kind of chicken or the egg. And in this case, maybe we're playing a certain type of defense based on the personnel that we have at the time. I also think that this is something that's in the broader context of the competition. You've always got to think about what is the next thing, what is the next type of tactic that's going to be useful or that's going to be innovative in the broader context of the competition. Obviously, as I said, Clarko's cluster was very innovative when it came out, that more zonal defense, no one could deal with it. And it's almost like they stole a premiership before people realised how to break it down. And so it's basically about trying to stay ahead of the curve rather than playing follow the leader.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, where does this sit? I still feel like this is more follow the leader, or like just basically, copying essentially very similar to what Brisbane do, which is they play essentially man on man, but they've got one guy who makes decisions about where to run, basically, which is Harris Andrews. And he decides, okay, do I go up to the ball? Do I go with my man? And maybe that's Charlie Comben, basically, he's that decision maker. And I'm completely okay with that. I guess the question is, in the broader context of our defence as well, what do we do? And we'll talk about this down the track, is where does our midfield defensiveness slot in? Because as we know, our midfield's is pretty good going forward, but absolutely horrendous going backwards. So
yes,
that I think is as big of an issue as the defensive style that we play in the back six.
Yeah, well, look, team defence is modern football, isn't it? And we're talking about Calico Cluster, revolutionising that 2008. It does feel like Hawthorn obviously still play that style a lot. And there's a few teams, Collingwood feel like they do that as well, where they're really trying to zone it out, intercept the ball along the line and then break. It gives me confidence that we're not going to try and do that because I don't think we've got the players at the moment. And yeah, you're right. So that leads on to the next point in this. And we can go back and forth a little bit here, but what does our midfield have to do to help this? So if we're going to play that more man-on-man, which makes me more confident defensively that we're not going to give up goals to people sitting in space and those real cheap ones that you look at and you just want to throw the remote through the television, which I think this is a good thing for North Melbourne. Like my gut tells me for this season and maybe next season to move up the ladder. I'm not thinking about like competing in, finals, getting to prelims and semifinals just yet, but to move us up the ladder over the next few years, I think this style of defense can improve our defense enough to get some confidence. And confidence is key when it comes to football, right? And if they can learn to do that and then break off that, I'm excited. So I like this foundation that we're going to be setting for this year, especially coming up, because I think that can make us jump quicker than it would be the long game. What does the midfield have to do to be able to help this? Because the work rate of the midfield was questioned a lot last year. And we're calling out those big names of LDU and Wardlaw, Simpkin when he was in there. Look, is it on Luke Parker at 32 years old to be pushing back? I mean, I would say if he's in the midfield, then it is. It's on everybody, regardless of age. If you're on the football field, you're old enough to be able to push back and smart enough, especially for a player like that. A midfield group collectively, is there a different way you would trying to play this midfield group to be able to help defensively and pick up that ball off the defenders if we are bringing it to ground a lot more and not giving up those easy marks? And then if they do push back and give that work rate, what's the best way that we can break forward? You're the mastermind here, Chief. Give me some insight here.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that when you recruit ball, and I've actually said this numerous times, so sorry if I sound like a broken record, guys, for out there who have listened to the podcast over a period of time. We've recruited ball hunters in our midfield. That's all our midfield is. It's guys that just want to go and get the ball. They see the ball and they go and get it. Now, there are players in there that are a bit smarter than that. I mean, obviously, Harry can do that, but he kind of reads it a little bit more and understands where he needs to go. LDU just goes and gets the ball. Wardlaw goes and gets the ball. Powell's a little bit of a hybrid. Parker goes and gets the ball. Like, these are all ball hunters, and when you've got that as your main core of your midfield, then you're left in a situation where someone has to do a role that is against their natural instincts. And you see, I'll go back to Brisbane. Brisbane have two guys in their midfield that play this more defensive role so much better. And it's not just getting back into defence, because I think if you actually watch the game, the midfielders definitely still run back in defence. I think it's more so about the understanding of your spacing at a stoppage, or the understanding about who I should man up when I go back, or where do I go in terms of the space. These are not things necessarily that come naturally to our midfielders that might come naturally to the two guys in question in the Brisbane Lions, of Josh Dunkley and Jared Berry. They're so good at that. They're big guys, obviously, at the start, but also they can lock down a good midfielder. They can get in the hole and stop leading lanes. They understand and read the game so that they know when to go back. That might be a couple of steps prior to what our players, how our players react, but that's a vital couple of steps, because it might be 2 meters and they're back plugging up that leading lane when we wouldn't be. So I think the problem more broadly is just the players that were recruited and the personnel that we've got in there. But even if that's the case, I still think they can learn it. And if I had the absolute answer, I would be in AFL land coaching midfields, right? But I do feel like a bit of it is structure, and a little bit of it is clearly training those structures so that we're a little bit more balanced when it comes to offense and defense. And yeah, Parker's possibly one of those players. I feel like Powell is one of those players who can play a little bit more defensively. They're the type of guys that we're looking at to play that Dunkley Berry role, I guess, to get back a little bit quicker. And you look at other teams that are way better than us at the moment, and they can't get it right. I mean, the whole reason the Bulldogs lost or didn't make the finals last year is because they can't get their balance right. They're all offensive midfielders. Yeah. And they were the best clearance team offensively in the competition last year, but they were like the third worst defensively. And so that cost them significantly, and that's why they were scored against heavily, and we're a bit the same. So we just got to get the balance right. I think the addition of Michael Barlow going in there, and who's a very experienced operator, a very good operator by all accounts, to try and sort out that dog's breakfast that is our midfield at times, I think will help us as well. I also think, to your point, playing back shoulder and a little bit with that more defensive mindset is probably going to be better from a stoppage scoring point of view. We're going to probably score less from stoppages because obviously what players tend to do is defensive players take more aggressive positioning during stoppages so they can intercept it and then rebound. Whereas now if we're just going to play more of a back shoulder style, we're probably going to get scored at least not quite as heavily against.
And it's trying to counteract that, right, with being able to push forward. And will this potentially not flood areas around the ground as well? Like maybe if we're trying to be a bit more defensive, trying to stay back a little bit more, it'll allow, because I look at our midfield and I'm like, and you pointed out this before, what are the strengths of this midfield, right? We've got ball hunters, we've got explosive players, we've got athletic players, maybe not necessarily best by foot, but can they burst away? Can they evade a tackle? Can they get around somebody? They can. So if we're trying to play a little bit more of a defensive style game, maybe we're not going to be flooding around the ball quite as much, and we can let those players operate. Now, look, the flip side of that is how many times in our midfield have we seen three midfielders standing there and there's five of the opposition, and you're like, well, how are we going to stop that? So it's going to be really interesting, and it all comes down to work rate for me. That can the players, other players smart enough to be able to read the game? Have they learnt enough and are coached well enough to be able to read the game and know where to be and have the work rate to be able to get there after a gut-busting run, after a big spoil, after a tackle, and get up and keep going again and again? And that's all down to fitness. I feel like, we hear fitness is improved every single year, in pre-season, and then we always are like, why aren't they fit enough? So that'll be a really interesting development. You pointed out some players before, which are the ones you would point to look at more of a defensive role through that midfield. I'll throw O'Sullivan in there as well. We saw him along half back. And just to touch on maybe our next segment a little bit, we're seeing some position moving where maybe a Hardiman is training up the ground a little bit. Foss and Hardiman have sort of been rumoured around the wings to be training as well. We know Kircher will probably go there a little bit, even though he's rumoured half back. Simpkin, Powell maybe on the wing. But do you think that's why maybe like Foss and Hardiman have maybe been rumoured up the ground a little bit more, is to play off this more defensive back six potentially?
Yeah, maybe. It's hard to tell. I mean, with Foss, it's like, he's one of those guys that you can just plug and play wherever. You could probably put him at half forward and he's going to kick a couple for you. He's a very good mark for his size. Also, I guess his end goal is to play in midfield. So, it makes sense that he moves up. Also, in when it comes to our backline with the injury to Jackson Archer, I actually kind of thought to myself, well, maybe that means that Foss has to play down back more defensively now, as well as McDonald. Same with Hardiman. I would have thought that Hardiman would, given that injury, would probably have to play a more defensive role and be more of a hybrid sort of defender where he does rebound at times but also locks down, as opposed to McKercher that's basically 100% attack. So, yeah, it does surprise me that they do play higher, and I guess we talked about before the pod potentially Cooper Harvey coming back and playing a role across half back, and potentially maybe he locks down in the stead of Archer, so that allows Hardeman and Foss to go up the ground. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I do tend to think that I still think, even though those are the rules, I still think it naturally Foss still plays back pocket, half back, as does Hardeman. I still think, because just Hardeman had such a good season there last year. He, is that Braden Maynard type of player. Take a good mark, hard, long kick. Makes sense for him to play back, I think. That's me personally, though.
Yeah, no, that's fair. What are your thoughts on Cooper Harvey going back? I was, fairly strongly opinionated on that last week with Joel, even though we slightly disagreed on it. I don't really see much point in the Harvey thing going back, and I'm not going to go on about that again, but we're here for your thoughts. Does Harvey give you any confidence playing sort of behind the ball a little bit? Like, what has he shown in his AFL career to you to make you feel okay about him playing sort of off half back?
Well, he's a decent kick. Obviously, good kick at goal. I mean, we haven't actually seen much of his field kicking at AFL level.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to tell. I think also that one thing about Harvey is that he is a smart footballer. Mm-hmm. He does have guile, and he does have intelligence around the ball and kind of reading the play. So I think that those are obviously traits that transfer really well to half back and playing that kind of less accountable half back role. I tend to think, though, that this is more about how do we get Harvey a chance in the AFL side rather than some sort of like mastermind tactical move, because he's just not going to play in the side, in my opinion, in the forward line unless we get significant injuries, because he's behind a lot of players. And one of his issues is that he doesn't play a traditional small forward. He plays more of that leading type small forward, the Jamie Elliott type small forward.
Bailey Fritsch type.
Bailey Fritsch, yeah, like he's less of a crummer, whereas Banch, Doveston, Constanti play that role. And then we've got our mid-sized guys that are probably better than him, like Zohar and Curtis. And maybe Dersma.
Even Dersma, yeah.
Yeah, so like there's just stacked in those positions. So I do get the feeling it's just like, well, we'll see whether we can turn him into a half-backer and see whether he's effective in that role. And I think you've talked about it in previous episodes with Joel. You don't necessarily like the idea of just if we don't have a player doing well, we just turn them into a half-back.
Yeah.
It's like the default setting.
I hate that, yeah.
Just turn him into a halfback. It'll be
well,
right.
no wonder we're so bad defensively. Like, this is where my head goes to. It's like, no wonder we're so bad defensively if we're just going to be like, we can't find a spot for this guy, so we're just going to chuck him at halfback. Chuck him at half forward. We're not going to give up, and regardless of position, like, I think as a team, we've seen over the last few years that defending, that's not an area of the ground that we can afford to trial things. We need to be better at this now. And that's why I'm positive and optimistic over this more defensive back shoulder 1v1 sort of style of defense, because I think defensively, just pure defensively, it will improve us. Now, does that hurt our attack going forward? I don't know. And that's yet to be seen. But I just don't understand why, if a play like Dersma, this is the same with the Dersma thing, where these guys have played in the forward line their whole lives. They're goal kickers. We know they can kick goals. And then we go, well, they're not getting in the forward line. So let's see if we can play this skinny, small guy who can't lay a tackle at half back. And then we wonder why we're so bad defensively. It just seems naive to me. And I'm no AFL coach. I'm a Clarko backer, and I trust what he does, right? He's won more premierships than me, mate. But just from my football knowledge and a lot of other people out there that I talk to, it just doesn't make much sense. And I know I'm not saying he's going to start round one or anything like that, but I just don't know where. I just don't like it, mate. It's like my swingman thing. So you go.
Yeah, it's the easiest position on the field to play. That's why they get guys to do it.
I don't know if I feel the same about that, though.
Oh, it is. It's just, you could put, there's some there's some guys who aren't very good who play half back and get 30 touches a week. And one of the reasons
get the touches, but how many goals has the team given up, though?
Yeah, but that's a different discussion, because they're not there for defensive pressure. And I understand that doesn't make sense because they're playing in the defense, but they're not there to play defensively. They're there as a springboard for offense. And The archetypal player at the moment doing that is Nazaya Wanganeen-Miller, who plays halfback and gets involved in the play and is very
Josh Dacos.
unaccountable. Josh Dacos is a similar
Butters.
thing. There's a slew of these guys who are actually just attacking weapons. I mean, Rosé did the same thing this year for Port. When he was struggling in the midfield, they actually pushed him to half back, and he was able to accrue a lot of easier possessions and give him maybe a little bit of confidence. And then also we know that kicking is such an important skill in the game, and that kicking, particularly from defensive 50, distributing out, but also the inside 50 kick, they're important kicks. And if you can get your good players behind the ball to take those kicks, maybe that helps your efficiency. And that's the thinking, I think, behind sending these guys back behind the ball. I mean, I was a big proponent of Dersma going behind the ball just purely to give him the confidence, get him ball when he's playing AFL level. And I think he's a good kick, so it kind of works. I think he's a similar body type to Nas. So
you look at all those other players we named, though, and I just don't think, like, I wouldn't put a Dersma in that category or a Cooper Harvey. Like, we're talking about pretty good midfielders, good to great to elite, some of the midfielders. And then you throw them back off the half-back line. And I think that's fine. I can understand that. And I know that's why, I'm a Caleb Daniel guy. I like what he does. And I think with a better defense behind him, and I think we saw that, especially against Richmond and plenty of other games last year, that what we want him to do can be very effective for us off the half-back line if our defense around him and other midfielders can cover if he's trying to push us forward. So I don't hate that role in particular, but it's the player that we're getting to do it, are players that are failing at other positions or failing to get in the team at other positions, compared to a lot of those other examples where if you move a Butters or a Nazaya back, you're like, well, they're an elite player, so they're going to be good regardless. They're not getting a guy who's 35th on the list and going, well, we can't fit you in anywhere and we don't know if you're quite going to make it there, so we're going to throw you to half back. That's where I think the difference is. Like, if we, like, when we put Sheasel back, I'm like, okay, I get it. McKercher off half back line, I want to see him in the midfield and wing, but I get why he's there. And I think these are good enough players at AFL level that you don't have to worry as much. But then Cooper Harvey's nowhere near these guys. Even a Dersma, talent-wise, yeah, sure. But what he's shown on the football field so far, they're not on that level. So this is why it just baffles me. I don't think you can put those guys who haven't played many AFL games in there to learn something completely new compared to a guy who's played 100 AFL games back there to learn, even though they don't have the defensive ability. So it confuses me, mate. But hey, like I said in the last pod when we discussed if he is the All-Australian halfback this year, I will more than happily eat my words and I will concede I am not the generational football brain,
Yeah, look, I think we'll just agree to disagree on that. I think classically it's been a thing that they've done, but at AFL level, but just to give people touches. But I kind of want a more settled side. If that makes
who would
sense.
be off half back for you then? If we're looking at a team and we're going more back shoulder, how would you structure up sort of with your medium to smaller players defensively and around the wings potentially?
Yeah, I guess so. At the moment with Jacko gone, it's Hardeman, Luke McDonald, and McKercher are the three. Yep. And I understand what you're saying with McKercher going into the midfield. I actually think that given our midfielders and given the way that they play, I actually think that McKercher will probably be in there at times, but I think this seems like a crazy thing to say, but I actually think he's wasted in the midfield. As in, like, I think he can be so much more damaging across halfback in that Nazaya Wanganeen Miller role. Like, that's kind of the role that he plays. And he's still getting forward and kicking goals. Like, we've seen him kick. He kicked a couple against Carlton. He's a great finisher. He'll still get forward. It's just he doesn't have to worry about the stoppages as much, I think, which I think is a good thing. Anyway, that's a by the by. So that's my three small mediums. And then you got like three of Comben, Logue, Core, Pink, Dawson, Threadgold.
Yeah.
Which is pretty decent, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everyone puts Charlie Comben in their back line. I think everyone knows Griffin Logue is going to be playing there with a full preseason now. I'd be shocked if he wasn't in there. And all reports, he's doing very well in the preseason. Pink or Dawson? Which way are you going to go there? Core's probably I would be shocked if Core got a game this year. I think Threadgold probably gets the opportunity over Core potentially, but I've seen crazier things. The discussion there's maybe Pink or Dawson. Which way would you lean? Just say round one.
Yeah, it's probably Pink right now and then Dawson later on. It's probably the best way to describe it. Yeah, It's pretty simple. I think hopefully, we're hoping that Will has really continues to improve. Pardon me, because he's obviously put on a lot of size.
Yep.
But it takes a little bit of time to kind of grow into your body, maintain the agility, lean up a little bit, get that cardiovascular fitness. And so hopefully he's getting close to that. I think we also forget with Will Dawson, he's like a day away from being the draft after. I don't
even know if he's 20 yet.
Yeah, he's still super young. So he might have turned 20 on December 31st. Maybe. I think that's when his birthday is. But either way, he's very, very young. So we've still got a few years to look forward to for him. But yeah, if he comes in for Pink, I think we'd all be pretty – if he comes in for Pink, I think we'd be all pretty happy kind of after a few games. But that's also dependent on Pink. Pink's actually improved since he's come on board. And that's something that people forget. It's there's no reason why Pink can't continue to improve. He's got the physical capabilities to do it.
26, 27?
Yeah, and you see it all the time is that players improve as their years go on, and whether it's a matter of they find out what regime works for them around the club during the week, or they find out exactly what works for them on the field and the things to focus, or they get better professionally, or they improve their strength and conditioning. There's a million different things that they improve as their career goes on. And Pink was better last year than the year before. And that's all. He might be better again this year. So which would leave us in a good spot, because we've got options and depth, which I think, overall, when I see, these mock teams being put up on social media, that the overall reaction from people is, oh, this is actually interesting because we've got depth now.
Yeah.
We've got depth in certain positions where we're we've actually got to choose between Pink and Dawson, or Trembath and Darling, or Doveston and Constanti, or these players that have shown that, not necessarily Doveston, but have shown that can play at AFL level, but aren't at the moment because there's a player that's better than them keeping them out.
No, absolutely agree. It'll be so interesting because, we've all got this idea in our heads of how to structure up and how to do this. And sometimes I feel like Clarko just pulls something out of the bag. If we're rolling into round one with, Daniel McKercher and Dylan Stevens are sort of like our half backers. And I'm like, oh no, Robert Hanson Jr.'s on the wing or something like that. Would I be shocked? No, because I feel like sometimes he's pulled those things. But I do hope now that we've got more of that depth. And I feel like as obviously young teams, and every team who starts as young as we are that goes on, you sort of should be getting a more consistent 22, 23 every single game week. So look, we can only hope, and it's all injury dependent as well. I mean, Goda's the biggest swingman there. I mean, we all think Goda's probably best 23 if he's fit, but he's never fit. So we just don't know. Some more positional changes then. We hinted at a few here. I obviously a fan of Colby going forward. You like him off that half back line. We've talked about Harvey. We've talked about Hardiman. Where do you see a Tom Powell and a Caleb Daniel fitting in this year? Do you see it like more of a wing role, a half back role? Simkin obviously being out on that wing now, which we feel like is pretty locked to start round one, bearing anything happening for the rest of the preseason. So we've had this discussion a few times on the pod where I'm like, there's so many players now that I'm not exactly sure where they're going to start. Even now we're having this discussion, I'm thinking about my back line, and I think now I'm knowing that we're going to go more back shoulder sort of stuff. I'd probably bring Daniel off the bench somewhere to fill a role around the ground that we need, and trust a Hardiman, a Finn O'Sullivan and a McKercher maybe a little bit more, with McDonald obviously being back there now instead of Archer. What sort of role do you see Daniel and Tom Powell playing through this midfield? Because I feel like they're the two at the moment that don't feel quite as locked into a position necessarily, and ones we haven't talked about yet. So what do you see from those two this year?
Daniel is a curiosity. because I feel like he's not as flexible as other players, and I don't think he can play many other roles.
The
other
size
than
limits him, obviously.
does, and also just his natural game style is the loose halfback, and
Yeah.
where he's not like other players in terms of his flexibility. Like we'll talk about Powell just in a second, and Powell can play multiple roles, whereas Caleb Daniel doesn't have that same luxury. And I do see this as like a fairly pivotal year for him. I think he probably starts, but this is I probably think that they're trying to maybe get Harvey to replace that role. And Harvey's like slightly taller and maybe a slightly better one-on-one. And I just don't see. I think this was always the case, is that Caleb was going to be a stopgap between where we were a year ago versus where we want to be in 2 years. And he's going to fill that role for a little bit. And there's going to be a point at which that role is overtaken and by someone else. And who knows where that is. I don't think he can play anywhere else, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's
Halfback
the
wing,
problem.
that's probably it, right?
Not even wing. I don't think he can play
Not
wing.
even wing?
No, I don't think he has. I don't think he has the gas tank to go
Yeah.
up and down all day, and that's what it takes these days. And you and Joel discussed this wing role, which has changed over a period of time, and you see the people there, and they're clocking up ridiculous Ks.
Yeah.
Some of these absolute elite wingers are just up and back all day. And also, to your point, they're helping out in defence, taking intercept marks. They're popping up fat side for marks over the top and kicking goals. And Caleb Daniel, as far as I've seen thus far in his career, doesn't have that ability. Powell, on the other hand, is a little bit of a different one. Just signed for another 2 years, which is good news for Powley. And, I think Powley played every game last year.
Yep.
Which is a credit to him and credit to his professionalism. I think he's a really entrenched player in North Melbourne's culture now. So I can't see him moving anytime soon after that contract signed. But I think he continues to play the role that he has in the last few years, which is just that rotation, sort of half forward and midfield, and maybe chopping out on the wing occasionally. But I see him just continuing that. And he's one of I think as a fifth midfielder, he's very, very solid.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, maybe a similar role to what a Sam Gibson used to do, or even like a Levi. And I know, well, Sam Gibson was really good. I was going to say Tom Powell's probably a better footballer than Sam Gibson. But I don't know. Sam Gibson, he was a very underrated player. But what I mean is, I feel like I was going to put Levi Greenwood in there too.
Glenn Freeborn, 1996. That's the role that he was playing. He was swinging through the midfield, kick three in the 96 grand final, second quarter.
A little bit of Craig Scholl about him, maybe. Who knows?
Craig Scholl's more of a dirt. He's more of a Zerha.
Yeah, more of a forward. Yeah,
he's more of a Zerha. He actually started his career in defence, Craig Scholl. Very good defender, but anyway.
Well, the next Troy Makepeace is Tom Powell. That's what we know. So, look.
Get him a gig at the airport handling luggage like Troy Makepeace did.
Wowee. Well, I just think, Tom Powell can play a lot of different roles. I like players that master one, though, and especially with key positions. I get very upset over key positions being able to play forward and back. I hate this. Whitlock, Dawson can play forward and back. Please don't. Just play forward or play back and get really good at that one thing. But I think in the midfield it's different. I think the midfield, you need those hybrid players to fill a role. Like you said, as a fifth midfielder, he's not going to be in that midfield best three, and I hope Foss gets in there. And I want McKercher in there, but there's Parker still to go through there, which I would prefer. But I do agree. He's probably the best player to just plug anywhere on the field, and at least he will be admirable at that and not be a negative on that, which is important. And I feel like a Sam Gibson or a Levi Greenwood or players like that sort of did that a little bit. Like if Sam Gibson popped up half forward, half back, wing, or you threw him a random CBA, I feel like he'd at least be admirable at that instead of having like massive drop-offs, which teams like the D's will have this year when, their best three isn't in that midfield. It's looking pretty grim. You know what I mean? So congratulations, Tom Powell, on the 2-year deal. I think that's great. I mean, 2 years on top of this year as well, so 3 more years of that. And yeah, I hope he can nail down a spot, even if that's not a specific position. If that's being really good at this hybrid role of being able to connect everything, and this whole discussion has been about backline to forward line. He can be a piece of that. He can be someone around the ground that is really, really good and effective compared to maybe some guys who are more effective in CBAs. And they've got a little bit more space to operate. With Tom Powell in a tighter space, I would maybe trust him to get a better disposal off than like a Wardlaw or an LDU. But obviously, I think Wardlaw and LDU are better players. So, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting balance. Dylan Stephens as well. I mean, what role is he going to play here if we're going more defensive? I wonder, does he make this team? Does he make the 23? Sorry, I'm too old school here saying 22. What sort of role is a player like that going to play? Can it go to break in if he's fit? I mean, Braden George obviously hamstring now, but there was talk about him. Like, where does these guys play? Is this a symptom of getting better? Is that what we're experiencing right now that we haven't seen for the last 6 years? Or are we just moving, are these players just not in the system that we're trying to play that's changing? Are we moving past them, or is the system changing?
No, we're just moving past them. I think, unfortunately, and a guy who I love is Will Phil, and we've moved past him.
That's a good example, yeah.
We've moved past him. He was serviceable, but...
Your man, Darcy Tucker, as well.
Tucker was a great example of that. I loved Tucker. These are the type of guys that are really good players, but we've just, in terms of aptitude and skill and talent, we've just moved past them at the moment, unfortunately, and performance at AFL level. So, yeah, Goda is a weird one. I kind of... There was such a small sample size. I just don't know what to think of Goda. Obviously, ideally, Goda is a Miles Bergman type player. That's kind of what I see him, who can play, he can play slightly, those medium hybrid forwards, but also can swing through the midfield at times if you need them to, like if you get an injury or you need a little bit of oomph or long kicking or whatever. But at the moment, he's not in the best 23. Dill Stephens is an interesting one because I feel like he had quite a good year last year off the wing.
I agree.
And
I'm the number one Dill Stephens man.
I feel like he's the kind of opposite to what I was talking about with Caleb Daniel, because he can run all day. He's got a great tank. I mean, a lot of people alluded to the fact that he was maybe a little bit harder last year around the ball, which is good to see. But I think he's at the moment in the wing rotation. Yeah, I think it's probably he's there. Foss is there. McKercher at times probably the wing rotation. Simkin, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to spring a question on you here that I've just thought of. I think it would be interesting.
Yeah.
If you think about the team, if you have to get the team up in front of you right now, please do. Is there any other players on this team that you could see changing position this year? We've seen players swing forward, swing back, be midfielders, be half backs now. Anyone else on this list that you could, imagine a rogue position change this year?
How rogue is? I mean,
you can go as rogue as you like, mate.
The roguest of rogue is Larky to centre half back.
That is true, but let's go in some sort of element of real. What's something you actually think is in the realm of possibility?
It's a hard one. Maybe Paul Curtis playing midfield minutes, like extended midfield minutes.
That was where my head was going to.
That would be exciting because obviously he's quite dynamic around the ball, and I love that left foot. And obviously his cardio has his fitness generally over the last 2 years has greatly improved. Like you can see it, he can run out games now, and I think he understands that. Is that obviously we've talked about this before, but the high half forward is a really difficult position to play because you've got to be super fit. You've got to be one of the fittest players on the ground. You've got to be able to finish. You've got to be able to tackle. Sorry, that's my dog.
Someone's getting excited.
He's a big Paul Curtis fan.
Well, we've got more Paul Curtis things to talk about after this too. Yeah. So this is a perfect segue as well.
And so I think he's got the fitness to spend time in there. It's just about kind of, it's one of, and as you know, Josh, sorry, that you're robbing Peter to play Paul sometimes. Like if Paul Curtis is kicking 45, 50 goals a year and then you're spending him in the midfield at times, like is that costing you on the scoreboard? I mean, they're things you probably have to weigh up, don't you? But yeah, that's probably the one in the back of my mind. I also think maybe also Hardiman playing in the midfield.
Yeah, that'd be
I think
interesting.
he's spending a little bit of time, like particularly with that run and carry, could be exciting. So yeah, that's probably it, I would say. I mean, Logue forward is probably another one. I mean, Logue basically came across from Freo because they couldn't find a spot for him. He was playing forward, he was playing back. He was playing forward for a lot, but then obviously they've found a few there, and then he was playing back and wasn't quite as good as like Pearce and Cox and a few other guys that they got there. So maybe he's a guy that they look forward at times. But I feel like now our forward line has options, so I think that's less of an issue right now.
I mean, look, we've sort of dabbled in this a little bit, but if he has a chance of him, I mean, someone we've barely even spoken about this preseason. If Doveston still needs time and we're still having problems down there, does Zach Fisher go in that forward pocket? Do we finally get forward pocket Zach Fisher? I think it'd be worth a go. I would absolutely pull the trigger on it if we had, I didn't mind Constanti up there, but say Doveston wasn't ready. Constanti wasn't scoring anymore, still hadn't got his shooting boots on. I still think it's worth a crack. And I know he's on the outer and, he's a player that we've signed along this journey that won't really be remembered that much, I don't think, poor Zach Fisher. But, I think that's the only way maybe he could go into this team because we haven't even mentioned his name off half-back with all this half-back chat. And the only other one I've got for you is I need Taylor Goad to be the forward ruck Luke Jackson hybrid. I need that in my life because there is your perfect two ruck rotation. You can make Taylor Goad 208 centimetre marking forward. Oh, yeah, hopefully he can kick better than Sam Draper, but then he can go into the ruck and chop out Jerry. And there's your ruck rotation for the next 100 years. And you get a forward line eventually with Goad going in and out, Trembath and Larkey. We got Whitlock there as well. I mean, now we're talking, mate. But I really, really hope, in all seriousness, that Goad plays forward in the VFL in patches because I don't see how he breaks into the team if Jerry is there. If Jerry is fantastic ruckman. So how does Taylor Goad get into this team? If he was an emergency a few times last year, all reports from training, he stepped it up again this year physically. It doesn't matter if he's looking incredible. If he's dominating the twos, where does he play if he hasn't really played anywhere else? So they put him at full back for a little bit a couple of years ago. He was averaging about one touch a game. I assume that was just to get him around the ball. That's when we were calling, this feels like Jacob Edwards a little bit to us. Obviously, he's turned into something better, even though he hasn't played a game yet, but we can see he's going to be better. How does he break into this team if he doesn't learn to play in the forward line, Chief?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I think the only potential to do that is if Goad comes into the team given the extra spot that we've got on the bench now. I mean, there's a lot of rumors and innuendo and strategic prognostications about what they're going to do with this extra person on the bench. I saw during the week that one of the assumptions was that there was teams that were going to hold that player back until the second half, which is like exactly the same, like the sub was, right? And you're like, okay, these AFL clubs have been calling for the sub rule change for 10 years. And now that the sub rule change comes, they're just going to act like they're a sub. Anyway, that's an aside. I think given that extra spot on the bench and, that maybe Taylor Goad can play, like come in and play, I don't know, 40% game time. I doubt that's the case, though. As you say, I think in an ideal world, he comes in and plugs a whole
Matthew Richardson hybrid wing role, Mason Wood role.
I mean, this is throwing something out there. I mean, one thing about Taylor Goad that is different to a lot of other ruckmen out there, and you mentioned Luke Jackson, he's more similar to Luke Jackson than a lot of other players. He's actually just a bit bigger than Luke Jackson. He's significantly bigger. He's a couple of inches bigger. But he's got one of the best 20-yard sprint times in our club. So he's clearly got the athleticism and agility. He's one of our favourite players who can jump out of pools.
Yes, you love a man who can jump out of a pool.
We've mentioned that metric a couple of times, and Taylor Goad is up there in his pool jumping metric. So could you play him as like a ruck rover, like a traditional ruck rover in the centre bounce? Imagine having a 208 ruck rover to Sherry in the centre bounce. Like,
this is the stuff that dreams are made of, Chief. I hope you know that because I could only imagine,
It's full Nuffy. That's full Nuffy.
It's full enough stuff, but that's what we want here. We don't want any of this reasonable, level-headed nonsense. We need enough footy chat. And that's what I love. I could only imagine Jerry tapping it down. Wardlaw gets a hard ball out to the running Taylor Goad, who just bursts through a pack and delivers a perfect pass onto Nick Larkey's chest. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the meaning of life, and I don't know the information, but that is as close as I think I've ever got to finding out the meaning of why we're on this planet.
Yeah, one salivates about it. It really is. It's really exciting. Yeah.
Well, look, maybe more realistically, the only way that Taylor Goad is going to be breaking into this team is if Tristan Xerri gets gastro, because we had a massive gastro outbreak this week at North Melbourne. Called off the Friday match sim. I mean, there's not really much news here, but I don't know if it was the chef with some dodgy chicken, left it out and was like, oh, no, I better keep that in the fridge. I forgot that's been on the bench for 3 hours or something like that. But, hopefully everyone is recovering, hydrating, get the hydrolytes in because we need you guys fit and firing in the preseason. But, look, gastro going through. I've never had gastro personally. I've had some friends who have had it and told me some horrific stories. So shout out to everyone at North with gastro. Hopefully you are recovering. And you're not bedridden. I don't know how bad it is. They didn't really report how bad it was, but let's hope the chef pulls his head in a little bit.
Yeah, part of me was thinking it was Bull's cooking that's got them all crook. I mean, maybe his food handling.
I don't want any Bull beef on this podcast, mate. We love Cam Zerhay. I would have assumed he would only cook the most perfect of chicken breast.
Yeah, well, hopefully he's using a temperature probe like the rest of us.
Yeah, you savages. Well, we're talking about chicken here as well, so that's why the dog's barking. All right, the last thing we're going to finish up on here is just the Paul Curtis stuff. We've all seen the story now. We've all read about it. Terrifying stuff, honestly. The story is crazy about him being in London, going to the hospital feeling nauseous, them giving him antibiotics and saying, yep, you can fly, mate. The photos of him swelling up on the plane with his feet and his face are just crazy stuff. So I'm so happy Paul Curtis is okay. Obviously, as a young father as well, not only on the field, because we need this man going forward. He's going to be an absolute superstar, but off the field, all his mates, his family and all that sort of stuff. Just horrific. Like a liter of pussy fluid out of his lungs and all this sort of stuff. And doctors saying could have potentially died if he wasn't such a young, fit footballer. And how they kept it so hidden, I guess because it was overseas, we didn't hear about it at all. And I'm glad it was hidden because, he probably doesn't need that swirl while he's recovering from all of that. The dog is going off, Chief, over there.
Sorry about that.
He's a Paul Curtis fan as well. No, that's fine.
He's a big Paul.
He's a big Paul Curtis fan.
Curtis fan.
He is. What are your thoughts on all of this? I mean, do you have anything to say about it? Because, look, there's not really much to dissect here, but it's just – I don't know. It hit me in a different way of a story. I think because we didn't hear anything about it, and it's such a potentially horrific outcome. It just hit a lot of North fans in a weird way.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the big problems is that it shows you how precious life is, and hopefully Paul is feeling a lot better. Apparently he is. I mean, they put out a really good piece during the week about how what happened to him basically, and the scars that he had from the drain tubes, and it was really harrowing. And life's really really precious, and anything can happen at any time that can completely change that. I think the interesting thing is, and I think this has been the case for a couple of years, which I think is really positive, is that they kept it in house, and I think that's great for his family. They can just sort of deal with it their own way. But I also think that says a lot about how everyone at North is quite united, and there's no leaks.
That's a great point.
There's no leaks coming out of the club, which I think is really, really positive. And I think going forward, that's going to have us in good stead. They're very united.
No, look, I completely agree. I think that's a fantastic point. A lot of other clubs, I'm sure journos are sniffing around for things, and I'm sure someone could have got offered a lot of money to break that story or, get a scoop. And yeah, I completely agree. The fact that the club feels so united by that and are not getting out, I can guarantee other clubs that absolutely would have. So, that if that doesn't give you more confidence that North's on the right track, it does for me. So the more in-house it is, Clarko's four walls, no one else gets in there. It's good in some ways. It's not, maybe even for podcasts and things, a little bit more access to the club would be nice. But, if it gets us to where we need to go, that's the main thing. So glad Paul is okay. I mean, I hope he plays round one and he's fit enough to play round one because he's an absolute superstar. But more importantly, I'm glad, he's a father and all that sort of stuff. And I'm glad he's fit and okay. All right. We might finish it up here, Chief. I think that's all. Look, thank you for listening, everybody. Please put your comments down below and all this sort of stuff. There's so many good talking points here. I want to know how you guys feel about the defensive shift. Does the back shoulder sort of defending, more 1v1 type of defending, make you feel more confident about our defense going forward? Or did you want to stick with the zone and see if we can get that Clarko cluster thing happening again? What would you prefer? Tell me who you'd be playing down in your defense. And thank you. Stay tuned to Further North. Subscribe, like, comment, all that sort of stuff. Chief, thank you so much for coming on again. We'll have you on in the future, of course. We've got to do our hot takes, our hot predictions for the year, our top 10 hot predictions, and which we always revisit at the end of the year and see how wrong we were about so many things.
Very wrong, always. See you, Josh.
Chat to you soon, man.
Bye.